Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvajakacharya Astarasata Sri Sri Madha's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Gaura Premananda All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, Fundamental Principles of Material Nature, Texts 23 and 24. What I would like to do today is chant each line of the two verses, and you can repeat after each line, then we'll go through the synonyms and the translation and purport. Mahat-tattvād vikurvāṇād. bhagavat-vīrya-sambhavāt, kriyā-śaktir ahaṅkāras, tri-vidhaḥ samapadyata, vaikārikas taijasaś, vaikārikas taijasaś, tāmasaś yato bhavaḥ, manasaś cendriyāṇāṁ bhūtānāṁ mahatām mahat-tattvād, from the mahat-tattva, vikurvāṇād, undergoing a change, bhagavat-vīrya-sambhavāt, evolved from the Lord's own energy, kriyā-śaktiḥ, endowed with active power, ahaṅkāraḥ, the material ego, tri-vidhaḥ, of the three kinds, samapadyata, sprang up, vaikārikas, material ego in transformed goodness, taijasaḥ, material ego in passion, cha, and tāmasaḥ, material ego in ignorance, cha, also, yataḥ, from which, bhavaḥ, the origin, manasaḥ, of the mind, cha, and indriyāṇāṁ, of the senses for perception and action, cha, and bhūtānāṁ mahatām, of the five gross elements, api, also. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The material ego springs up from the mahat-tattvā, which evolved from the Lord's own energy. The material ego is endowed predominantly with active power of three kinds, good, passionate, and ignorant. It is from these three types of material ego that the mind, the senses of perception, the organs of action, and the gross elements evolve. Purport. In the beginning, from clear consciousness, or the pure state of Krishna consciousness, the first contamination sprang up. This is called false ego, or identification of the body as self. The living entity exists in the natural state of Krishna consciousness, but he has marginal independence, and this allows him to forget Krishna. Originally, pure Krishna consciousness exists, but because of misuse of marginal independence, there is a chance of forgetting Krishna. This is exhibited in actual life. There are many instances in which someone acting in Krishna consciousness suddenly changes. In the Upanishads, it is stated, therefore, that the path of spiritual realization is just like the sharp edge of a razor. The example is very appropriate. One shaves his cheeks with a sharp razor very nicely, but But as soon as his attention is diverted from the activity, he immediately cuts his cheek because he mishandles the razor. Not only must one come to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness, but one must also be very careful. Any inattentiveness or carelessness may cause fall down. This fall down is due to false ego. From the status of pure consciousness, the false ego is born because of misuse of independence. We cannot argue about why false ego arises from pure consciousness. Factually, there is always the chance that this will happen, and therefore one has to be very careful. False ego is the basic principle for all material activities which are executed in the modes of material nature. As soon as one deviates from pure Krishna consciousness, he increases his entanglement in material reaction. The entanglement of materialism is the material mind, and from this material mind, the senses and material organs become manifest. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada makes the point that the path of spiritual realization is like the razor's edge. And he gives the example that, at least for a man, a person in a male body, shave the face. But one has to be very careful, because if one misuses or mishandles the instrument, one can cut oneself. And this statement about the path of self-realization and God-realization being like a razor's edge, comes from the Upanishads, from the Katha Upanishad. And actually, in English literature, there was a famous novel called The Razor's Edge, written by a man named Somerset Maugham. And, it's the story of a soldier who had been fighting in World War I. After the war, he goes to India and lives in an ashram and becomes instructed by a guru. Of course, like many Western depictions of such things, it was an impersonal guru, but still the title of the book came from that phrase in the Katha Upanishad. So we do have to be careful in our practice of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada gives the example that it can be seen that someone who is practicing Krishna consciousness may go away. So he gives that as an example of how it is that someone can go from the state of pure consciousness to the state of material consciousness by misuse of independence or free will. So the first step in that process is that one desires to enjoy independently from Krishna. Krishna bahir mukahana bhogavanchakare nikatashta mayatari japatiyatare. Bahir mukha means one turns one face away from Krishna. And then why? Bhogavansha, desiring to enjoy independently from Krishna. And when that happens, one becomes entangled with Maya, the material energy of Krishna. And the first transformation that takes place is that one identifies the material body as the self. And this is a necessary part of the process. This ahaṅkāraḥ, or false ego, which binds the consciousness of the living entity to the material body, and through the material body to the material world, is a necessary process. Jivara Srupahoy Krishnara Nityadas, the eternal original position of the living entity of the jiva soul, is eternal servant of Krishna. And each jiva has its swarupa, its original spiritual form with spiritual senses in which it serves Krishna. But that spiritual form is good only for one thing, serving Krishna. You can't do anything else with it. If you want to try to enjoy separately from Krishna, you need another type of instrument in which to do that. So that material instrument is the material body. And it can't enjoy itself in the spiritual world because the spiritual energy is only doing one thing. It's only trying to please Krishna in various ways. So if we want to enjoy something, it has to be something other than Krishna's spiritual potency. It has to be something other. Of course, even the material energy is an energy emanating from Krishna. Of course, even the material. There is his energy called pradhan, which is the undifferentiated material energy. But then when Krishna glances over the pradhan and energizes it with the time factor, the elements which had previously been merged into each other separate into these different elements that we're hearing about here. But it all begins with false ego. So in that sense, it's a consciousness-based universe. In an earlier chapter of this canto, the 10th chapter, there's a similar description of this process. Actually, we see that this account of the evolutionary development of the elements, beginning with false ego, is repeated several times throughout the Bhagavatam. Perhaps different aspects of it are emphasized. But the ultimate message is Krishna is the source of everything. Aham sarvasya prabhavo matas sarvam pravartate. Everything is emanating from me, says Krishna in the Bhagavad-Gīta. And ishavasya midam sarvam. everything is Krishna's property, ultimately. He's the ultimate controller. So if we think about it, I mean, sometimes people blame God for creating the material world, which is dukkhalayama shashvatam. It's temporary and it's full of various miseries, which different people and different living entities experience in different forms and to greater and lesser degrees. But even if you're in the best position in the material world, you have the position of Lord Brahma with a lifetime of trillions of years and opportunity for experiencing higher grades of sense gratification. It's still temporary. Brahma bhuvana loka punarvartana arjuna. Krishna explains, even if you get the best position in the material world, it's still a place of temporary place where one has to undergo birth and death. So, but it all begins with consciousness. But even though people with an incomplete understanding or poor fund of knowledge are bewildered by the fact that there is suffering in this material world, they say, how could an all-merciful, all-powerful God do such a thing? But it's not just up to God. In this, as I said in the description of this process that's given in the 10th excuse me. In the description of this process that is given in the 10th chapter, it's described how Mahavishnu injects the totality of jiva souls, conditioned jiva souls, into the various universes. From Mahavishnu, when he breathes in and out, universes come out, expand from his transcendental form and are reabsorbed back into it. But the reason he's doing that is because the conditioned souls want to experience something different than their position in the spiritual level of reality. They want to be independent enjoyers. So when I think about it, the arrangement that Krishna has made is the best one that I can see he could have made, because it respects the independence and the freedom of each living entity, each jiva soul, to experience what it desires to experience, but at the same time encourage them that that's never going to make you happy. Like you take the fish out of water, no matter what comforts you give it on the land, it's not going to survive in a very happy way because it's out of its element. So in this material world, the soul, which is eternal, full of knowledge and full of spiritual pleasure, anandamaya bhyasat, says the Vedanta Sutra, it can't experience in this environment, it can't fully express or experience its natural qualities. Therefore, we feel uncomfortable in this material world. We sense on some level that we're eternal, but we can't experience our eternality here as long as under the influence of false ego, we are identifying with the material body, which is subject to birth, death, old age, and disease. So that is there. So we're kind of like co-creators of this situation that we find ourselves in. But Krishna, although he's offering us the opportunity to try to enjoy ourselves separately from him, apart from his service, he's also giving every opportunity to each soul. He accompanies each soul as super soul. Within the material body, the individual soul is there, but the super soul is also there. And he's carefully watching. The Upanishads give the concept of two birds and a tree. You know, you have the tree of material existence, which is producing its fruits. So one bird is trying to enjoy the fruits of that tree and is, because of it, always unsatisfied, unhappy. But the other bird, as compared to the super soul, is just waiting for that individual bird to realize, no, I'm never going to be happy by trying to eat the fruits of material existence. And the other bird is just waiting for that bird to turn to him, and then they can fly to the place where they really belong. You know, the tree of material existence it's like a reflection of an existing reality. Like you have the reflection of a tree and the water, and you try to get the fruit of the tree, you'll never experience the real taste of the fruit. But the reflection of the tree points to the existence of the real tree. And if we turn our attention to that, by the process of taking up the practice of devotional service, we can learn to enjoy those fruits. But it depends ultimately on understanding that we're not accidental creatures in an accidental universe, as most material scientists are presenting today. It's kind of a godless picture of the universe. They say they have a position called physicalism, which means that they accept that the only real thing is matter, and everything that exists, including our consciousness, is the result of material combination, unguided, without any, like Krishna explains it very nicely in the 16th chapter of Bhagavad-Gīta, that there's a class of philosopher who believes Jagat Ahur Anishvaram, the universe is without any controller. But if we study carefully, we can see that that's not the fact, that there must be some controller who is conscious, individual, and personal. There was a time when many scientists accepted that idea, the God hypothesis, as one researcher today calls it. So, in that, in that picture of how the universe comes about, there is an evolution. Like, the material scientists have kind of grabbed a hold of the term evolution, but it's something that's found originally in the Vedic literature. Like Srila Prabhupada here is describing, or the Bhagavatam is describing, the process by which the material elements develop is an evolutionary one, in the sense that it begins with the more subtle thing, the most subtle thing, which is ahaṅkāra, or false ego. And then false ego and under the different modes produces the elements, but it does it by a gradual process. First, from false ego and the mode of ignorance comes sound, and from sound comes ether, and the sense of hearing. So it's actually from the subtle things that the elements develop. And then from ether comes air, from air, fire, from fire, water, from water comes earth. They develop in an evolutionary way. But it all begins with consciousness and sound vibration. And by sound vibration, the whole thing can be dissolved, and the living entity, the jiva soul, can become free from its connection with this material world. Anavarti Shabdat, the Vedanta Sutra says that one can become liberated, one can become free, one can be established in one's original natural position by hearing. So, the first realization on the path of spiritual progress is that I'm not this material body. I am spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna. So that realization is called mahat-tattvā. Once Srila Prabhupada was giving a class in India somewhere, and he was lecturing, and then he asked one of his disciples, "Now you speak, you say something." And the devotee started to speak. He began talking about the different varnas and the ashramas, and he mentioned how the householders are entangled in material life. And Sri Prabhupada said, "I have a question." Say, you're criticizing the householders, but your whole movement here in India depends on the householders who become your life members and give you money. So what do you say to that? And different devotees began trying to answer the question. Well, by doing that, they make advancement and so on. And Srila Prabhupada says, well, that's not the actual purpose of life. If you ask any of these people, ask anyone, what is the purpose of your life? And they will say, well, my purpose is to work and earn money and support my family and make sure my children are educated so they'll have a nice position. And you said, if you ask anyone, they'll say like that. They have to do their material duty. Or if they're maybe in a more elevated position, like a politician or a scientist or something, what are you doing? Well, I'm doing my duty. For what? For future generations. And he said the real thing is they've missed this mahat-tattvā. Shrotavyadini Rajendra Nrinam Santi Sahasrashaha Apashyatam Atma-tattvam Grihesha Griya-medinam. So the real problem is not having this focus on atma-tattva, understanding who one really is, and being able to act on that knowledge. So here in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we're getting a picture of who we are, really what our situation in this material world is, and what we should be doing to qualify ourselves to exist on the level of pure consciousness. Srila Prabhupada uses that phrase here a few times in this purport, and I use it in my preaching. People seem to appreciate and understand that there is a level of consciousness free from identification with matter and the material world. And that is the actual purpose of human life, to understand that aham brahmasmi. I am not a machine made of molecules. I am a pure, conscious individual. And my duty is to understand that in my relationship with the Supreme Source of all conscious beings, who must also be conscious, individual, and personal. So I'll stop there. Any question or comment? Drutakarma Prabhu.
Haribol, thank you, Prabhu. You made the point in your class that most of the scientists feel that we're living in we're an accidental product of an accidental universe. But I'm under the impression that most scientists also accept that we're living in a universe that's finely tuned for life. So if it's finely tuned, who do they say is, how did that come about? How's it, what's there? Is it just
by accident?
Uh-huh.
They propose, one obvious proposal is the fine-tuning of various natural forces and constants of physical laws is designed. It's put in there by some intelligent being who existed prior to the universe. That's an obvious conclusion, but to avoid that conclusion, the most common way they do is they propose, well, there are millions and millions and millions of universes that are being produced, and in each one of them, the values for these constants, like the ratio of the mass of a proton to an electron, is varying, kind of like at a casino. You've got, and we just happen to live in the one universe in which everything is properly arranged for life to exist in it. So it's kind of like we've won the lottery, by accident. They're right in one sense. There are millions and millions of universes, but in all of them, everything is arranged for life to exist in it. There's a purpose to the universe. And if there's purpose, then that means it has to have been figured out. It has to be made in such a way that that purpose can be carried out. So Of course, they have no way of accessing those other universes and seeing whether there's life in them or not. So, imperfect speculation. Okay, Hare Krishna, glorious to Srila Prabhupada, glorious to Srimad Bhagavatam.